A really interesting topic that we're covering here tonight, and well, we'll see where it goes, right? All right, let me tell you a little bit about my guest, but first let me tell you the website, www.latenightinthemidlands.com. Go on over, become a late nighter, be informed, inform others. It's important. It really is. Just spend a little time over on Facebook if you dare, and you'll see it is important that we inform others. But let me tell you a little bit about my guest. Steve Oxtakolnis is an author, research scientist, instructor, and consultant in the area of advanced human-computer interfaces and interactive systems. Educated in physics and computer science, Steve is the former director of the Virtual Environment and Interactive Systems Program for the National Science Foundation Engineering Research Center for computer field simulation. He served on the professional research staff at the University of Washington and the facility of Mississippi State University. Steve is an invited lecturer and researcher for the U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, National Reconnaissance Office. He's got a heck of a bio here. Steve has also authored 3 books on the topic of virtual and augmented reality, as well as dozens of papers, magazines, articles, and technology reviews. His recent book is Practical Augmented Reality. So with that, folks, we're going to welcome my guest, Steve, to the show, and we'll get this thing started here. Let's go ahead and bring him up here. First, we got to get rid of that. There we go. All right, so here we go, folks. Steven's joining us now. Skype trying to psych me out over here. Good evening, Stephen. I welcome you to Late Night in the Midlands. How are you?
Very well. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, Stephen, you've got involved in some really interesting stuff here. I love the technologies, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about your research and all your work in it. I thought maybe a good place to start would be a little bit of background as to how you got going and steered in this direction with all of this.
The very first time I put on a stereoscopic head-mounted display and experienced virtual reality for the first time was over 20 years ago. And this was in a small laboratory it's called the Human Interface Technology Lab at the University of Washington. And this was it was the first time these technologies rose to the prominence of hype. And we were just starting to screw around with the technologies and see how they can be applied in different areas and so on. And here we are today.
Yeah, I remember my first run-in with virtual reality. I was 17 years old. I'm now 45. It was at Kings Dominion Amusement Park in Virginia. And they had this booth set up, and it said virtual reality. And if I remember correctly, me and my friend paid $15 each, I think, to experience this thing. And let me tell you, it was nothing compared to what it is today.
Yeah, the technologies, everything from the computers that are used to drive the simulations through to the resolution of the displays themselves. Back in the day, we were using small LCD arrays in front of each eye that had a 320 by 180 resolution, compared to now where you have 1080p displays in front of each eye and so on. It's a dramatic difference in terms of display quality, speed of the hardware that's used to drive the simulations, the different sensor technologies, and we can get into that as the evening rolls along.
Yeah, I had my sister-in-law, she has, I don't know what cell phone it is, but they got this hookup for virtual reality. And she says, oh, you guys got to try this. So she comes over one night with it. This wasn't too long ago. And I'll tell you what, it's incredible. I mean, it is literally incredible. I mean, you are there. The stuff seems so real. And, I mean, it's come a long, long way. I did this one with the haunted house, and there was this demon boy who was just popping around everywhere. And oh my God, it was like he was really there. And so I can't wait to get into this more because, when we talk about virtual reality and and even augmented realities, we're talking, it's like another world, literally another world, like another dimension's been opened.
That it is. Perhaps a good place to start would be to explain a little bit of the background and what these technologies are.
Yes.
Humans are spatial beings. We see, hear, touch, and move through our real-world surroundings in 3 dimensions. But majority of all of the tools or the instruments that we use to interact with computers are based on 2 dimensions. So you have a mouse that you slide around a 2D surface on your desktop. Mm-hmm. The display that you look at, even if you're looking at simulated 3D imagery, it's like a window into a 3D world, as opposed to experiencing the 3D world as though you're inside of it. And this is where the virtual reality side of the equation comes in that instead of looking at a flat panel display that's sitting on your desktop, you actually wear a display on your head. And there's a small flat panel array, one in front of each eye, stereoscopic wide-angle optics, which spread the images around to cover majority of your vertical and horizontal field of view. And then there's a sensor that tracks the position, or X, Y, and Z, or the orientation, or the roll, pitch, and yaw of your head so the computer knows where you're looking. And what this allows them to do is give you the visual sensation of being inside of those images as opposed to on the outside looking in through a window. And so you're able to physically look up, you're able to turn around and see what's behind you in a 3D world. You're able to physically move about, and as the system is tracking your position, all of the imagery smoothly moves past you as though you're actually inside of that computer-generated world. And the applications for these technologies are just extraordinary. And it goes far beyond the gaming realm, which has captured most of the public attention so far, to be able to put you in the middle of a first-person shooting game or piloting a spaceship around, shooting out other things in space and all that and zinging around. That's all fantastic, and it's driving a lot of awareness, but this is used by architects. It's used in the defense industry. NASA uses it to train astronauts. Surgeons are now using it to practice delicate surgical techniques before they ever have the patient on the table. And the list just goes on and on and on of how, and it's not for entertainment purposes, these other applications, so much as it solves problems with respect to 3D positioning tasks, being able to visualize complex geometry. For instance, architects across the United States are now using these technologies to take clients on a walk through a building that's been designed for them before they ever turn a single spade of dirt in a construction process.
That's incredible. It really is. Now, when this was thought up and they were inventing this, was what was the original intentions? What were they hoping for in the very beginning with all this? Entertainment or far more useful ways of using it for humanity, I guess.
There were 2 parallel tracks that roughly took place along the same development tracks that took place along the same timeline, and this was back in the beginning in the mid '60s and extending into the '70s. The Defense Department, if you can imagine sitting on the inside of a cockpit of a fighter aircraft, and you've got the dozens of highly coded dials and displays that provide you information about your aircraft and what's happening outside of the aircraft. Well, as the aircraft continued to become more complex, pilots began complaining about information overload, where they were spending too much time looking inside of the cockpit at the displays and trying to figure out what all of that was telling them, as opposed to paying attention to what's happening outside of the aircraft. And as a result, the increasing complexity of these systems resulted in pilots being distracted, which meant we were losing a lot of pilots. And so researchers at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, amongst others, they started looking into how to take and display information to the pilots that allowed them to assimilate the information faster. And so instead of letters and numbers, they started using graphics and icons, which the human brain can process a lot faster than looking at letters and numbers. And then the pilot, even if it's just a fraction of a second, this preconscious information processing that they have to go through before they achieve a mental image of what's happening outside of the aircraft. These are what these technologies eventually or have evolved from, was solving situational awareness problems for pilots. And then they began emerging away from, so they went from like the dials and displays up to the dashboard mounted head-up displays. Mm-hmm. And then they moved from there to the pilot's helmets, where they were projected onto the inside of the visor or onto optical elements that were in front of each of the pilot's eyes. So no matter where they were looking, they would have the complex avionics information and increased threat awareness because of the different graphics and so on that was constantly overlaid onto the pilot's real-world view. And these technologies have evolved from that particular area. That's where the drive to make using complex machinery easier. The way my old boss used to say it was that the goal of these technologies is not to make the human more computer-like, but to make the computer more human-like in the way that it supplies you information so that it leverages the strengths of the human perceptual system to allow you to process information faster. A perfect example of this, we've been talking about the visual side. There's also a 3D audio component to this. Now, let's say that you're racing down a runway in a fighter aircraft and you're talking to the control tower. Normally, you hear a monotone voice in your ears. Well, with three-dimensional sound, you're able to attach a directional property to that sound. So let's say that the control tower is behind you and off to your right. It will sound as though the voice is coming from that direction.
Yeah.
But you can also attach that. Let's say that you've got a threat receiver that's detected the launch of a missile. They can attach a sound, a virtual sound, to that missile. So as it's zigzagging behind you and you're jinking left and right and so on, you don't have to try and physically turn around and visually acquire it. Just by hearing the Doppler shift behind you or below you and so on, you will know where the missile is at so that you can keep your vision focused on solving problems related to the geometry of flight, as opposed to looking to the left and right and so on and trying to visually acquire where the missile is at, because you can hear it moving around left and right. So
then this must help also with people's senses, I would think. I guess it could go both ways. It could really screw you up too, I would think. I mean, like, could somebody get, stuck into this? I mean, where they come out of it and, I don't know, they're still like in some kind of virtual thought pattern. I don't know, mind programmed or something.
I wouldn't go that far.
Good.
But there are other more formal clinical ways to describe the phenomenon that you're describing. For instance, more than half of the people that put on these head-mounted displays now and play the different games, ride a virtual roller coaster and so on, end up getting nauseous.
Hey, I'll just to interrupt quick now, I did the roller coaster too, and the only thing that was missing was, I guess, if you had a seat that went along with what you were seeing and moved you back and forth or whatever, I mean, it'd be unbelievably intense. But what I like about virtual reality is if you shut your eyes, it's over.
Yes. And this thing that you mentioned, that absence of a seat or some type of motion platform, that actually is at the root of why people experience what they call visually induced motion sickness. When you have a very compelling visual sensation of motion, but without the corresponding inner ear cues or the vestibular cues, it results in increased what they call stomach awareness, and then you start to get the sweats, and then you start to feel a little bit nauseous and so on. This is the exact inverse of true motion sickness. So if you can imagine being on the inside of a boat and you're getting tossed around in a storm, in that situation, you have a very compelling inner ear sensation of motion, but you don't have the visual cues. And it's that mismatching of sensory information that the published research for the past 30 years, this is what the leading theory that is being used to explain why people are getting sick with these systems, is that you don't have the normal inner ear sensations that you would have that correspond to the visual scenery moving past you. So when you're going around, for instance, on the roller coaster, you don't feel yourself getting pulled up the hill or rushing down the hill. all you just see are the visual cues or the vection that goes along with it, and that's that sensory decoupling. The way that the body responds is to, if necessary, take you to the point of puking. So
and it does enhance the intensity of it. I mean, the suspense of it all. Because me, for one, I don't like roller coasters in real life. I don't. I've been on one. It was an accident. So to do this virtually, as it's going up the track, and I'm hearing the. I mean, it's getting pretty intense for me, and I see it as a good way maybe for people to overcome their fears in some sense too.
That's one of the primary killer application areas right now. Is more than 50 VA medical centers around the country currently use a fully immersive, a real virtual reality system in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. And so this was something that was developed at the University of Southern California and the Institute for Creative Technologies there. They have virtual Iraq and virtual Afghanistan, and they can bring up different scenarios. For instance, a little Afghan village, and the patient puts on a head-mounted display, has a weapon in their hand. The platform that they're standing on has the deep bass speakers on the underside, so that the platform will vibrate, for instance, when an explosion goes off or you're hearing the rumbling of your SUV. And what they try to do is, in the safety of the clinician's office, recreate those triggers that causes the negative reaction to manifest inside of the patient. And what they're able to do is kind of wean the patient away from those triggers. And it's proving to be highly effective in a treatment of thousands of soldiers that have spent, some of them 6, 7, 8 different tours over in the Middle East. They come back, and now there's a viable treatment. Besides just throwing them a bottle of meds or something like that, there's actually this experiential simulations is having a profound impact on the soldiers now.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of positives to it, for sure. And so you say NASA uses this too. Now, do they use it to stimulate, atmospheres or environments on other planets, or what are they doing with it?
So every astronaut that goes to the International Space Station now, it doesn't matter what country they're from, they train for dozens of hours using stereoscopic head-mounted displays, special gloves that track the flexion and extension of the fingers, as well as the position and orientation of your hands. So they'll train, for instance, the astronauts in being able to navigate around the space station. And then for their particular mission profile, they'll have, let's say that they're going to go up and replace different components on the outside of the space station. They will actually run through those simulations on the ground using VR months before the astronauts ever fly. So that's one particular area that they use it at. Another one is teaching the astronauts on how to manipulate objects in a microgravity environment. So if you can imagine back in during the days of the space shuttle, they would send the astronauts up and they would manhandle satellites. And while those satellites are weightless, there's still tremendous mass that they have to learn how to manipulate in order to get, for instance, a satellite down into the payload bay by hand. And so they have different setups down at Johnson Space Center where the astronaut will put on a head-mounted display, these special gloves, and they will grab large styrofoam pieces that are suspended in the middle of a room using multiple different wires. And they're able to simulate the mass of an object in order to help the astronauts learn how to maneuver things around. And so there's a variety of different ground-based training scenarios that they use these technologies for. But surprisingly, they also use them on the International Space Station. So NASA has up there right now a human-like robot. They call it Robonaut. And instead of it being completely computer-generated, what the human operator would see, the robot has 2 eyes, a set of arms, and the human operator, whether or not the person is on the ground or it's an astronaut on the space station, they put on a head-mounted display, put on their special gloves, and as the astronaut moves their head around or moves their arms around, the robot mimics those movements. And what they would eventually like to be able to do is to have it so a ground-based operator can control the robot on the outside of the space station making repairs so that the astronauts don't have to take the risk associated with doing an EVA or extravehicular activity or a spacewalk. They also want to try and free the astronauts up on the inside of the space station from having to perform loads of mundane tasks. For instance, the astronauts up there, it's a constant effort to clean the inside of the space station because of condensation on the walls and normal maintenance tasks. And they would eventually like to be able to pawn this off to the robots and maybe have it controlled by a ground-based operator as opposed to the astronauts, so that they can use their time more effectively on the different investigations and engineering problems that they're trying to solve up there.
Now, I wonder, too, I mean, how useful would this be for, say, astronauts who are in space for a long period of time, who might miss, maybe they get a little homesick, so they put on this get up and I don't know, it feels like they're back on Earth for a little while.
Absolutely. So this actually is a great segue into talking about augmented reality. Okay. So with virtual reality, you're fully immersed. You have no references to your outside world. While with augmented reality, there are a class of head-mounted displays that actually allow you to see through the optics to your real-world view. And then what they do is overlay alphanumerics, or letters, numbers, symbology, and graphics. And those are planted into your real-world view, and they're anchored in position. So a perfect example, let's say that put on a head-mounted display and you see a virtual saxophone sitting on your couch. You can walk all over your living room and so on, looking at that virtual saxophone laying on your couch, and it stays in position as you move around. So you can look at it from different angles and so on. A perfect example of how this would be used is there's displays now that have been displays and simulations that have been developed at Embry-Riddle University in Florida, and it will take avionics information from a Cessna aircraft, and it will turn it into graphics and symbology and so on that the pilot can see hanging in space as they're flying through. And so you can see the highway in the sky that you're supposed to be following. You can see other aircraft around you that are highlighted and marked off with different letters and numbers and different symbology and so on. And so you can look all the way around you and have an added level of situational awareness of things that are all the way around you, whether or not it's the air route, aircraft moving. You can put semi-transparent volumes there so that you know you can stay out of restricted airspace. You want to stay out of the restricted airspace, don't fly into the red area. And
yeah, well,
these are the
and I mean, this is all so amazing. I mean, if anybody out there, if you've not tried it before, I was kind of a critic and who cared, and then I did it, and I'll tell you what, it's I guess the best way I could explain it is literally like going into another dimension. It's like, okay, so that dimension is, say, virtual reality, and that dimension is created by somebody, but it now exists. I mean, in your mind, when you're there, it exists. It's real. And so I wonder, how far along are we in this technology too? Because I think of like Star Trek with the holodeck, where the guy would walk, one of the crew members would walk into the holodeck and, computer, I don't know, I'm at a picnic out in the woods, and literally the entire environment around them would change.
Yeah, we're still at the very beginning of these of these technologies and their particular uses. Something that one of the challenges that people in the industry have is trying to meet the expectations that Hollywood has put in people's heads. For instance, the holodeck on Star Trek, or the Tony Stark's head-mounted display, where he puts it on when he puts on a suit, and all of a sudden you got all these graphics and all this stuff giving you information, all that. We're still a ways away from things like that. There has been no killer application that everybody has to have. It hasn't been developed as of yet. But again, these tools have only been commercially or at commercial price points for just about 2 years now. And it's still, considering what the technologies are intended to do, we've got it'll be a while before it gets to be that real. But one thing that's for sure is that you cannot simulate mass inside of these simulations. So you're not going to be, for instance, tossing people over the bar or leaning up against a virtual wall because there's no way to simulate mass and structures like that when it's all just computer generated. And so you'll have a very compelling visual sensation of being inside of these computer generated worlds. You will have a very compelling audio sensation. And to some extent, you will have tactile and force feedback, for instance, on your hands and your arms. But to get to the point where it's indistinguishable from the real world, we're many years away from that.
Well, that's interesting, because I was thinking, as I was getting ready for tonight's show, one of the things I thought of is, how far away are we before we have, a virtual city where you walk into the city and it's just, it seems like it's getting to that point. I mean, they could recreate actors, and I know this is different, but, somebody dies now. It's like Elvis, he could still come out on the stage and sing for us. I mean, with these technologies, we have come so far. Yet we're so far away.
We have, and it has advanced a considerable amount. Now, to this point in our conversations, we've been discussing computer-generated imagery. There are a new class of cameras out now that will, instead of being a regular video camera that films a particular viewpoint, there are cameras now that will film spherical video. They film 360 degrees around you in stereo. And all of those views are carefully stitched together. And so while you do not have the ability to change your position, meaning your XYZ position, you can change the orientation of your head. So let me give you a perfect example. Paul McCartney, a couple years ago, had two of these cameras during a performance. One was put on a stage, the other one was put out in front of the audience. And they filmed an entire concert this way. Now, people can go to like the Google Play Store now and get the stereo clip in 360 video that you can download onto your phone, and you can watch Paul McCartney play Live and Let Die. And so while you're looking at him playing on a piano, you can turn your head and look out at the audience, so you can look up and see the scaffolding with all the lights above you. You can watch the flash pots go off. You can see the drummer off to one side, the guitar, and you can change your viewpoint and be out in the audience looking at the stage.
Oh, what a great way to get over stage fright. Somebody who's got a big event might be coming up, and they you could use something like that to get a taste of it, right?
Absolutely. And so there are a number of musicians now that are making plans to so when you buy a ticket to a concert, you go through like Live Nation or some of these other companies, and they take a large chunk of those ticket sales and leave the remainder for the bands. Well, one of the ways that the bands are considering going around that now so that they can retain more of the ticket price is to set up systems like this, play a live concert, record it, and you can stream it out to people so they can watch the concert from their home, pay a premium right there. It all goes to the band, and if people get the visual sensation, the audio sensation of being at the concert, up on stage with the band and all that stuff, but without having to leave the confines of their home.
Is this, would you classify this as the beginning of what might be man and machine, I don't know, kind of interfacing, I don't know, that I've heard the elites, like the CEOs of Google and those type folks who have been looking for a way to live forever. And I could see companies like that investing tons of money into something like this because, who knows? The possibilities are endless, right?
They really are. Now, I need to, I want to kind of clarify the position from which I come at these technologies.
Sure.
I'm a research scientist. I work directly with these technologies in order to solve real-world problems in defense in an industry. And I do lean into the hype a little bit and will engage in discussions about what the future holds and so on, but it's always with a very clean I'll draw lines to what I would agree to as being the future of the technologies and so on.
Okay.
Well, that's so, for instance, you were alluding to, the line between man and machine, for instance. I think you were trying to get at the concept of it being blurred, and I think you're spot on in that the people that design computer mice, so the different tools that we use to interact with computers, whether or not it's a dial pad or a space ball that's used to manipulate imagery on a CAD designer's computer screen. These computer interface designers, they're continuing to try and break down the barriers that allow humans to maximize the use of their different perceptual mechanisms. For instance, being able to see things that you're designing in true 3D, to be able to walk around them or stick your head into it and view it from angles you could not possibly achieve with a 2D display, or with 3D sound, being able to simulate the acoustics of the inside of a closed space or inside of a building with tremendous accuracy just by programming in, for instance, the sound absorption coefficients of the different building materials. Now that's where there's tremendous progress being made at trying to you can either say it by break down the barriers. Another way to say it is trying to maximize the use of the human perceptual mechanisms to be able to assimilate information faster. Does that kind of make sense there?
Yeah, absolutely it does. Sure. So then what does the future of this technology look like? I mean, let's go within the next 10 years. I mean, where do we expect to be with something like this? I mean, people like kids are buying PlayStation 4s and things like that right now. I mean, 10 years from now, are they going to have like, I don't know, walk-in video games? Like, I don't know how to, like a box that they go sit in?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, there are location-based entertainment centers popping up all over the world that are based on these technologies. So, for instance, there's an outfit in Linden, Utah, where you can go in. I think it's like $12 for a 10-minute simulation, something like that. But you go in with a group of your friends. Everybody gets a head-mounted display, a backpack-worn small computer, and you get a weapon. And you go in, you play the shoot-'em-up games inside of these pods that they have. So you're moving around. If you were to take off the head-mounted display, you would just see a room with various geometric features with no surface detail, whatever. But you put on the head-mounted display, and that featureless cylinder that you just saw in the real world is now like a transport pod. And that sphere sitting over in the corner is some glowing orb. And you're in these strange worlds where the geometry inside of the virtual world corresponds to the geometry in the physical world. And so when you go up and you put your hand on that virtual wall to tap in a code to open up a sliding door, you're actually physically tapping on a wall. And so these are popping up all over the place. There's efforts in Hollywood and a number of studios now to change the science of cinema, where normally you go to film school and you learn how to like frame a shot and so on and lead the audience and play with their emotions and all that. Well, that's with one camera viewpoint. Now, imagine filming in 360 degrees, and they're trying to just now starting to crawl through the effort of designing a new science where the action is taking place all the way around the viewer and trying to figure out how to keep people's attention focused in one particular direction when something's about to happen inside of the movie. And then how to scare the crap out of people by getting the sound right and having a jet race over them from the back. All that.
Yeah. It's amazing stuff, and I'll tell you, once you try it, you really can't get enough of it. And for me, I mean, I was fine with it. It didn't mess me up any, but like you said, some people get sick and get motion sickness and things. How common is that? I mean, it's kind of probably a rarity, right? Because I had about 8 people I know of who tried it, and none of them got sick from it.
That's outstanding if they didn't, because more than half of the people that put the head-mounted displays on right now experience some sort of discomfort, whether or not it's a dizzy feeling or a nauseous feeling. One of the interesting parts is that the human perceptual system adapts. Yeah. And so 2 to 3 times into using these, that nauseous sensation actually will go away.
Well, my mother-in-law, she did complain of a little bit bothering her, but she kind of spikes up the drama. I think she was afraid of the demon, to be honest with you.
Another interesting thing is that this type of response, that these physiological responses, varies by age, by gender, and even by geographic location. For instance, women are more susceptible to visually induced motion sickness than men. Chinese women are almost double their susceptibility versus people in the West. Nobody understands why it's like this as of yet. There's still a lot of research that has to be done in order to try and gain an understanding of this. But those numbers or those divisions are very, very well defined in that women will experience these, have the potential to experience these physical manifestations more than men will. And Asians typically will experience it more than those users from the West. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, listen, let's take a break here, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more about this. And folks, if you've got any questions, you are more than welcome to call in and well, try to call in. I think the phones will work, but then what do I know? We know Skype's not been very cooperative. But other than that, there's other ways. You can also get a question to me in the chat room at latenightinthemidlands.com. Private message me, real easy. Click on my name, bam, just put your question in, and I'll get it. You can also send questions through our moderators on the YouTube end of things, and they'll get the questions to me. So real easy, folks. My guest is Steve Oxtakalnis, and we're talking about virtual reality. We're talking about also his books. We've got them linked up, by the way, over on latenightinthemidlands.com. So if you want to go check out his website and his book, it's all linked up there for you on the home page and on the schedule page. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. Don't go away, folks. This is Late Night in the Midlands. That's the reality. We'll be right back. All right, we are back. It's Friday night. It's Late Night in the Midlands, and, well, we're talking about all kinds of good stuff. How about virtual reality, augmented reality, with my guest, Steven, who is linked up on the homepage at latenightinthemidlands.com, right on the picture slider or in the schedule page. You can find him. He's going to be with us for a little bit longer, and then for the last part of the evening, Dr. Rand will be popping on here with us, give us some updates. We're going to talk some current events. That coming up. But before we do anything further, let me give a shout out to my wonderful radio affiliates. First, High Point Radio, located at the top of New Jersey, bringing us into New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania on 100.5 FM, 1620 AM. Thank you. WAFR 87.5 FM, bringing us into Wareham, Massachusetts, live Monday through Friday. Thank you. How about WCET 87.7 FM, Columbia, South Carolina, on Columbia Talk? Thank you. They run us actually a couple times through the day. K98 Talk, and of course our very own, the LNM Radio Network, the mothership of it all, the reality of this broadcast. It all happens right here on Late Night in the Midlands on the L&M Radio Network. The best guests, the best information. Oh, and don't forget, I'll know probably by Monday what day we're going to hold a roundtable with John B. Wells and a couple choice hosts from the network. Also, we're going to be planning a roundtable. I'm going to do a roundtable with my moderators. See what's on their mind. See how crazy they are and how crazy they get. So we'll be doing that as well here in the upcoming weeks. So let's get back to it. Don't forget the website, www.latenightinthemidlands.com. You know what to do, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Become a member, be informed, and inform others. You know, I had everyone seen that. Well, a lot of you probably seen the virtual reality video that I did. They recorded me, the kids did, when I was doing the roller coaster. Not very nice, okay? But anyways, I had that up on YouTube. I had to take it down because I was wearing a shirt, and that shirt had a picture on it, and the picture, apparently the photo, the image was copyrighted. I thought if I bought the shirt, you know, what? So now when you take pictures, if you're going to share your pictures on, what do? We got to all go naked now to do that? According to YouTube, because of the image on my shirt. So I said, well, if they're going to flag it and do all that and make it not available in certain areas of the country, I'll just take it down. And so I took it down. I tell you. And, YouTube, it's a really good concept. It's just, boy, I wish things weren't so asinine when it comes to stuff like that. I mean, my God. And there's also a law. So music, you're allowed by law to use up to 30 seconds, but they still hit you anyhow. That's why I got to have permission for everything I use, because if not, they'll make me take it down. But, YouTube's secondary. The L&M Radio Network is where it all comes together. And so, if we're ever gone from YouTube, you know where to find us. I hope we're not, but you never know. One day they might say, well, to get rid of them, and that'll be it. So, all right, let's get back to it. We got a question from one of our listeners, Stephen, and let's see, it is Colette. And she said, how does the guest think virtual reality will be used with AI in the future, meaning artificial intelligence?
Wow. Colette. Trying to stump the guest. My thought would be that the AI angle will probably come down along the lines of sensor technologies. So when you have one of these displays on your head, the computer needs to know where you're looking. So you got to be able to track the position and orientation of the user's hands and their head, so that not only does it know where you're looking so it can draw the correct images, but what you're reaching out and trying to interact with. And AI can play a big part in, for instance, predictive algorithms. If it can render imagery in advance of you turning in a particular direction, then you're reducing the computational load on the system. So predictive algorithms like that, I think there are a variety of different applications that can be coupled with AR and VR and AI in order to help solve problems with industry. I see there being an intersection clearly between it, but it's going to be application specific. Because programming for AI is a tremendous effort in and of itself. Programming for both AI to be used in a virtual environment is just compounding the challenge. But I definitely think that we'd get there.
Right. And now you said that there's medical implications with this as well. Like they're using it to perform surgeries and stuff. But now I guess it's being used to train surgeons, right, for surgeries that have already been performed, obviously. I mean, they're not learning from scratch from virtual reality. So, how exactly does it help them? I guess I'm judging virtual reality from the way I did it. But, how are they actually touching something? They could feel the scalpel on the person. Is that how it's done?
There's multiple application areas. So let's start with the most obvious.
Okay.
Let's say that you're a patient lying in a hospital bed. The physician comes in and they have to constantly look up at the monitor on the wall to see what your vital signs are. They got to walk out of the room and open up that wall cabinet and pull out your chart and make notes and read up your history and so on. So there's a number of hospitals right now that are using Google Glass. Even though it's been taken off the market and it's not commercially available, they still sell loads of these things into different enterprise settings. And so hospitals will use Google Glass in order to display medical records for the physician when they're inside of the room. So as they're talking to the patient, they can overlay their different medical information from their chart. You can overlay medical imagery like CAT scans and X-rays. There's other hospitals, for instance, at Stanford, where you can directly tap into the telemetry from the different machines that are monitoring vital signs. So that information is overlaid onto the physician's real-world view, so you never have to look away from the patient. So there's one application area. Let me take the listeners down to a road. So normally when you have a CAT scan done, a CAT scan is actually a volumetric image. But when the physicians are looking at them normally, you're looking at a 2D cross-section, and then they will step through the cross-section back and forth in order to be able to piece together a 3D representation of whatever they're looking at. But that's normally visualized in their head. While with these types of systems, you're able to look at the entire volumetric image. You're able to stick your head into that imagery and look at features of the anatomy that you couldn't possibly see using a standard 2D desktop monitor. So there's another way. And then the third way, I just saw just a couple weeks ago an example of this where there was a CAT scan done of an individual's head that had a tumor. And what they were able to do is isolate the mass that was the tumor and remove away the skull, all of the rest of the features of the anatomy, and so that they just had essentially the tumor hanging out in space. And what this allowed the brain surgeon to do is to look at the backside. So let's say they're going in, the approach surgeon goes in through one part of the head, through one direction, but they don't know what's on the backside of the tumor, and so on. And to be able to, prior to even starting the surgery, to be able to visualize what the backside of the tumor is and see where its little fingers extend out to, gives the surgeon an increased level of situational awareness when they're digging around inside of somebody's body. All the way through to practicing, for instance, a knee replacement procedure, where inside of the surgeon's office, they can put on the head-mounted display, use two hand controllers, and they can actually run through the hundreds of steps that are necessary in a knee replacement procedure, bending the leg up, making a cut below the knee and above the knee, taking that section out and shaping the new piece that's supposed to go in, driving going through all of these steps and repeating them over and over, so that once you get into the operating suite, you've gone through the procedure dozens of times in a virtual simulation, and now you're more familiar with the steps that'll have to be taken with a live patient, all the way through to training people on human anatomy and being able to go up and view, for instance, how blood is rushing through the different ventricles and how they're all timed together with the different pulses and all that, and being able to see that from different angles and understand flow and all of that. Students that are using these in their study of human anatomy are raving because it allows them to see things that they would normally have had to visualize in their head. And now they're able to see it out in front of them. So it's externalized so that they can examine it using stereo vision.
I see. And now where can people get their hands on your book? The usual places?
So the usual places. The book is called Practical Augmented Reality. The publisher is the large publisher Pearson. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Inform IT, in most major university bookstores.
All right. And listen, if there's anything else that you'd like to get out before we're done, by all means, go right ahead. And I want to thank you so much for being here on the show tonight. And I look forward to talking about advancements in this technology in the future.
Mike, I graciously appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about these technologies. These are, you asked a question a short time ago before the break, what are we looking at 2 to 3 years down the line? So right now you have these large displays like the Oculus and the Vive that hang off the front of their face. They're not so much heavy, but they're also not small. There's new displays that are currently being tested. So they've already been designed. They're going through the testing phase right now, that are starting to approach the size of a pair of sunglasses, where instead of using a flat panel array, an OLED array in front of each eye, stereoscopic wide-angle optics, so on, these displays will actually, the new displays will actually project the imagery into your eyes and use the retina as the imaging surface.
Wow.
And so you're able to get down closer to a pair of stylish sunglasses. And you'll start to see these appearing on the market within the next couple of 3 years. Also, dual-purpose displays where you can completely, like, for instance, snapping a little shade onto the front, you can take your augmented reality display and also use it as a virtual reality display. So there's dual-purpose displays that are already in development. The next generation, 2 to 3 years from now, the systems that people are buying are likely going to be gathering dust on a shelf because of the new generation of displays will be just removing a lot of the troubles. A lot of them, the larger high-end displays out right now are all tethered. You have cables that come off of these displays and so on. Well, all of those cabling will start to go away as well. And so there's exciting things happening in this field that are going to impact so many areas of engineering, design, solving problems in terms of worker efficiency in industry. And I would encourage your listeners to pay more attention than just the entertainment side of it, because it's going to be changing the IT experience for many, many, many people over the next few years. And I hope that your listeners and you are as enthusiastic about adopting these technologies as I am.
I most certainly am. I'm not one of those people who's against technology. If it's used the right way, I love it. So I'm looking forward to it. But listen, I thank you so much, Stephen, for being on, and we'll keep you linked up on our website, and keep you linked up in the archive as well. So it'll also be available on YouTube for everybody. And I thank you so much, and don't be a stranger.
Thank you, sir. Have a great evening.
All right. You too, my friend. Good night.
Good night.
All right, folks. There he goes. He's the author of Practical Augmented Reality, and linked up over on our website at latenightinthemidlands.com. Stephen, he is in one heck of a line of work there. I'll tell you, virtual reality, it's really awesome stuff. I mean, and of course, me, I've got my mind wanders. I get outside the box a lot, and especially when I put something like this on, and I it literally is like another dimension. It really is. The only, I guess, good part plus is that you could close your eyes and it's over, but it is. I mean, it's like another world, and it's just unbelievable. It reminds me of when I was much younger. Really, it does. I was going to talk about this with the guest, but I don't think he would have appreciated it as much as maybe some others would. And that is, it's kind of like taking an acid trip. It really is. It's like, holy smokes. It's not real, but damn, it looks real. I don't know if I like where it uses your retina for to place the image, because I don't know. I've heard of TV screens they got. Remember back in the old days, they had start coming out with these large screens and sometimes you could burn. You had to be careful with the video games because it would burn image into the screen. What if that happens to your eyeballs and the image gets burned? I don't know. And maybe that can't happen. I don't know. He's the expert, not me. I don't know. For me though, I'm the thinker. I just think, what if one day you have these devices and they're like, I don't know, it's like that's how you go into other dimensions. You get in these devices and bam, you're there. Because that's how it felt like. I did the roller coaster, I did the Demon Boy, and that's another. This is why I wait. I don't buy stuff like this. It's like everything. My son says, "Oh, you should get the new. You got the old game system." I'm all right with it. I like it. I'm still enjoying it. Why go spend hundreds of dollars more for something? The only video game I play, I'm going to tell you all about them here in just a moment. A really interesting topic that we're covering here tonight, and we'll see where it goes, right? All right, let me tell you a little bit about my guest, but first let me tell you the website, www.latenightinthemidlands.com. Go on over, become a late nighter, be informed, inform others. It's important. It really is. Just spend a little time over on Facebook if you dare, and you'll see it is important that we inform others. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my guest. Steve Oxtakolnis is an author, research scientist, instructor, and consultant in the area of advanced human-computer interfaces and interactive systems. Educated in physics and computer science, Steve is the former director of the Virtual Environment and Interactive Systems Program for the National Science Foundation Engineering Research Center for computer field simulation. He served on the professional research staff at the University of Washington and the facility of Mississippi State University. Steve is an invited lecturer and researcher for the U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, National Reconnaissance Office. He's got a heck of a bio here. Steve has also authored 3 books on the topic of virtual and augmented reality, as well as dozens of papers, magazines, articles, and technology reviews. His recent book is Practical Augmented Reality, So with that, folks, we're going to welcome my guest, Steve, to the show, and we'll get this thing started here. Let's go ahead and bring him up here. First, we got to get rid of that. There we go. All right, so here we go, folks. Steven's joining us now. Skype trying to psych me out over here. Good evening, Stephen. I welcome you to Late Night in the Midlands. How are you?
Very well. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, Stephen, you've got involved in some really interesting stuff here. I love the technologies, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about your research and all your work in it. I thought maybe a good place to start would be a little bit of background as to how you got going and steered in this direction with all of this.
The very first time I put on a stereoscopic head-mounted display and experienced virtual reality for the first time was over 20 years ago. And this was in a small laboratory it's called the Human Interface Technology Lab at the University of Washington. And this was it was the first time these technologies rose to the prominence of hype. And we were just starting to screw around with the technologies and see how they can be applied in different areas and so on. And here we are today.
Yeah, I remember my first run-in with virtual reality. I was 17 years old. I'm now 45. It was at King's Dominion amusement park in Virginia. And they had this booth set up, and it said virtual reality. And if I remember correctly, me and my friend paid $15 each, I think, to experience this thing. And let me tell you, it was nothing compared to what it is today.
Yeah, the technologies, everything from the computers that are used to drive the simulations through to the resolution of the displays themselves. Back in the day, we were using small LCD arrays in front of each eye that had a 320 by 180 resolution, compared to now where you have 1080p displays in front of each eye and so on. It's a dramatic difference in terms of display quality, speed of the hardware that's used to drive the simulations, the different sensor technologies, and we can get into that as the evening rolls along.
Yeah, I had my sister-in-law, she has, I don't know what cell phone it is, but they got this hookup for virtual reality. And she says, oh, you guys got to try this. So she comes over one night with it. This wasn't too long ago. And I'll tell you what, it's incredible. I mean, it is literally incredible. I mean, you are there. The stuff seems so real. And, I mean, it's come a long, long way. I did this one with the haunted house, and there was this demon boy who was just popping around everywhere. And, oh, my God, it was like he was really there. And so I can't wait to get into this more because, when we talk about virtual reality and these and even augmented realities, we're talking, I mean, it's like another world, literally another world, like another dimension's been opened.
That it is. Perhaps a good place to start would be to explain a little bit of the background and what these technologies are.
Yes.
Humans are spatial beings. We see, hear, touch, and move through our real-world surroundings in 3 dimensions. But majority of all of the tools or the instruments that we use to interact with computers are based on 2 dimensions. So you have a mouse that you slide around a 2D surface on your desktop. Mm-hmm. The display that you look at, even if you're looking at simulated 3D imagery, it's like a window into a 3D world, as opposed to experiencing the 3D world as though you're inside of it. And this is where the virtual reality side of the equation comes in, that instead of looking at a flat panel display that's sitting on your desktop, you actually wear a display on your head. And there's a small flat panel array, one in front of each eye, stereoscopic wide-angle optics, which spread the images around to cover majority of your vertical and horizontal field of view. And then there's a sensor that tracks the position, or X, Y, and Z, or the orientation, or the roll, pitch, and yaw of your head, so the computer knows where you're looking. And what this allows them to do is give you the visual sensation of being inside of those images, as opposed to on the outside looking in through a window. And so you're able to physically look up, you're able to turn around, and see what's behind you in a 3D world. You're able to physically move about, and as the system is tracking your position, all of the imagery smoothly moves past you as though you're actually inside of that computer-generated world. And the applications for these technologies are just extraordinary. And it goes far beyond the gaming realm, which has captured most of the public attention so far, to be able to put you in the middle of a first-person shooting game or piloting a spaceship around, shooting out other things in space and all that and zinging around. That's all fantastic, and it's driving a lot of awareness, but this is used by architects. It's used in the defense industry. NASA uses it to train astronauts. Surgeons are now using it to practice delicate surgical techniques before they ever have the patient on the table. And the list just goes on and on and on of how, and it's not for entertainment purposes, these other applications, so much as it solves